lend advice when advice is asked for, and otherwise keep their nose out of the business of Lassen County, because that is yours. We want our state representation to be part-time. California cranks out 800 laws a year. 800 laws a year, I can't even imagine that. About 400 of them come out in the last week of the legislature. They call it the sausage grinder. They're literally up till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, amending, producing. In fact, the illustrious Senator Sierra, I think he was, from Los Angeles, one of the cities in Los Angeles, gutted a health and safety bill. In other words, they had a public health bill for behavioral health or something else. He took all of the language out of that bill on the midnight hour, Friday night, I believe, and he reinserted language to give Siskiyou County an Indian casino that the county supervisors don't want, and that the county doesn't want, and that will increase crime in our county and so on. And he passed that legislation jumping on the stump and saying, well, there's really no opposition to this. Well, how on earth would he know? Because he never asked the people that live there. And he has the power to do that. So we want a state where each county has a legislator. Now, once again, let's go back to Earl Warren and Reynolds versus Sims. We had the federal model of government in California. And it started in 1925. But Earl Warren said that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, Section 1, says everybody has equal protection under the law, and that's true. But where the fraud comes out is he decided that Article 1 has to do with voting, and it doesn't. It doesn't mention voting at all in Article 1, or 14th Amendment, Article 1, Section 1. It mentions voting in Section 2. You can't be denied the vote for race, creed, or color. A couple of other amendments mention voting. You can vote if you're over 18. Women can vote. There are different voting amendments, but it's not the 14th Amendment. That has nothing to do with voting by state. And what he did was, in a case earlier, in about 1962, and I'm not going to bore you with all the cases because there are about 10 of them, the Supreme Court gave itself the power to regulate the election processes in the states. Now, one of the dissenting justices in the Baker case said, we have no business in the thorny thicket of state politics. But Warren said, well, sure we do. Because if we do this, no state will ever deny someone the vote based on race, creed, or color because they'll be afraid to. They'd be afraid they'd end up in court. 30 court challenges later, they came up with another case, which was, I can't remember the name of it now. It's Gray versus Sanders. And in the Gray versus Sanders case, they said, well, now we need to fix all of the places where we were weak in the Baker case. And that way, no state will discriminate because they'll all be afraid to. They'll end up in court. Well, about 25 court challenges later, Reynolds versus Sims comes up, and then Warren said, I'm just going to drive a nail in this box. And he said, all state elections will be run by apportionment schemes that are approved by the court. That was it. That was the end of the federal model of government. And so he did that based on the 14th Amendment. Well, oddly enough, there were 30 or 40 state legislatures that had the federal model of government, which means one senator for each county, both before the 14th Amendment and after it. In fact, California didn't ratify the 14th Amendment until 1959, and we had the federal model of government all the way up until the Reynolds decision. So I'm asking myself, was Earl Warren the first Chief Justice in 150 years that just happened to get it right? Did none of the other Chief Justices really see what the Constitution actually meant until Warren showed up? And by the way, Earl Warren was what General Eisenhower called the worst damn fool mistake I ever made. So the president that appointed him was sorry afterwards, but he wasn't sorry enough because we're suffering for that. So now, after the Reynolds versus Sims case, we have, oh, and by the way, Earl Warren said something in his retirement. He said, he was asked, what's your crowning achievement as Supreme Court Justice? And he didn't say desegregation. He didn't say civil rights. He said, I forced 30 state legislatures to change the way they elect state officers. So what Earl Warren did was he amended the Constitution without the benefit of the legislature and without the benefit of the people. And there are a lot of constitutional lawyers that think it was just bad law. But that's why we're here. Now remember, this is pretty complex, but remember, we're not here to overturn Reynolds versus Sims per se. We're here because of it. because the court went on twice after Reynolds' case to ignore itself, and that's where we're coming to our cause. Once was Brown versus Thompson in Wyoming, where the court, oddly enough, granted a very small Wyoming county state representation that had less than 3,000 people. And he said all counties deserve representation, no matter how small they are. And I was kind of reading that, and I thought, well, gosh, that's not what he just said in '64. But what he said was, and this doesn't change Reynolds versus Sims because it isn't done prejudicially and it serves a greater state political good. So here the light goes on. They went on to ignore themselves again in Sawyer versus Tulare Water, where he said in Reynolds initially, Warren initially said in Reynolds, votes can't represent rocks and trees. Votes have to represent people. But in Sawyer versus Tulare Water, or Saylor, I'm sorry, versus Tulare Water, he said votes can represent rocks and trees, provided it's not done prejudicially and it serves a greater state political good. So California has gone with the Reynolds model. One man, one vote. Why? Because all political power rests in the urban areas. That's where they claim all the money is. In fact, the LA Times said that the Jeffersonians are crazy because all the important work is being done in the cities and on the coast. Willie Brown, the mayor of San Francisco, who, by the way, supported Stan Statham's state split in 1992, Willie Brown said, those people up there just need to learn that all the power is in the urban areas, which is where it belongs, and those people need to learn how to obey. That's what he said. He said it on MSNBC, I heard it about 40 times because I was so mad I played it over and over again. So, now Warren had the concept Reynolds versus Sims and he ignored himself. So our question is, okay, now if we get our own state, how can we get away with having a senator for each county? Those 2 times the court ignored itself. Because it will be for the greater political good. Our counties will still retain the one man, one vote system. In Lassen County, people of Lassen County will vote for their state senator. People in Plumas County will vote for their state senator, but that senator will only represent Plumas County or only represent Lassen County. So you're not going to lose your vote, but your vote will be more effective because the man who serves you will be within your reach. In Siskiyou County, I go in Walmart and I see our District 5 supervisor and I'm going up the aisle, wait a minute, she's trying to get away from me, but she can't. And I ask her, why did you do this? And she tells me, she's a good woman and very smart and we all like her. But the point is, whether I agree with her or whether I don't is irrelevant. She's a good person trying to make the best decisions she can for our county because she has the local knowledge and local talent to do so. California is nothing more than a large public service corporation. And this half of the state is the division that nobody's ever been in. Most of them don't even know where the door is. It has cobwebs on it. Most of the middle managers in Sacramento have never visited the factory that we call Jefferson. They don't know what it takes to live your lives. They don't have any idea what happens when they enact laws that subjugate you or take your money. And so what we're asking for is, what do you do in any big business when you have a division that the company claims is unprofitable? Well, number one, you either fire the boss and get a new boss. That's not going to happen. Because under Reynolds versus Sims, most of the people like what Jerry Brown's doing. And that's okay, that's the way it works. But what you can do is what most corporations do. You spin off that division and you allow local talent with local wisdom to address local problems. And that's exactly what we propose as a spin-off, where we give the county of Lassen the lion's share of the power with a part-time legislature. They're going to work on even years on legislative matters, on odd years, budgetary matters, and they will form a state with a constitution that is so difficult to change it'll be unbelievable. One of the mistakes California's made is it's amended its own constitution 521 times in 163 years. The federal constitution has been amended 17 times in 225 years, and a couple of those people thought better of and repealed the amendment, like the alcohol amendment. So what we want is a constitution that protects the individual, protects your liberty, protects your right to property and your ability to use that property to make a living for yourself and your family. And that Constitution will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to change, because what we're doing is we're trying to think for the next 50 generations. We're trying to think for the next 100 years so that our children and their children will have a much easier time securing liberty for their posterity. quickly through how this is done. The way we decided to do it, and by the way, never having broken a state in half before, mistakes may have been made, but we came up with the idea of a declaration. Now, a declaration is a document that has been reviewed legally. It's a legal document reviewed by many county councils, and it is appropriate and sufficient for the job, but it's carefully worded in order to create a principle called standing for the county of Lassen. One of the things it does have is the legal description of Lassen County, because when you ask to get out, the state has to know, well, who wants to get out and where are you? So it has the legal property description of Lassen County, and it simply says, I declare and petition to withdraw from the state of California due to lack of representation, and then the middle part of it is the individual problems that face Lassen County, I don't know, water, things, sage grouse, water, grazing, things like that. In Siskiyou County, it's timber, water, coho, salmon, mining. In Del Norte County, it was the state's lack of ability to allow them to expand the airport, timber mining, things like that. So it is an open document. Your supervisors are free to change that to anything they wanted to say. That's how it works. But it has been reviewed and approved by 6 counties. It's been reviewed legally. It is a good document. And it says certain things. There are certain principles in there that it's best not to change because it weakens your standing in any discussion that happens later in federal court. So what we're doing really is we're asking your supervisors to affirm a declaration that gives Lassen County a seat at the table when representation is discussed, and it will be discussed. We have enough counties to start that discussion now. But what we would like to do between now and the first of the year is get as many counties as want to join. If you don't want to join, it's okay. God bless you and good luck with California, because we got about 12 other counties we're headed to. We have new counties calling all the time. We've actually been called from Orange County and San Diego County. We said, gosh, thanks fellas, but really it's a little far afield. What we want is a state that has a historical, economic, and moral linkage to one another, and that's the state of Jefferson, clearly. Ranching, farming, mining, gold, rural areas that lack representation. And if Southern California would like to get away from Los Angeles, they're welcome to. We'll show them how to do the Article 4 process. But we want about 10, 13, 15 counties as a very good-sized state with 1.2 million people, and we'll have about a third of the geography of California, maybe a little bit less, with an economy that starts out 15% bigger than the state of New Mexico. And here's the trick, nowhere but up to go from there. Because we're going to form a regulatory environment and a business environment where we can capture some of the 34,000 jobs that went to Texas last month. And with responsible use of our resources, we have plenty of money. I mean, we are surrounded by all the resources in the world. Where's the money coming from? Well, in Siskiyou County alone, the payment in lieu of taxes for healthy stands management, in other words, logging just down to the federal timber harvest plan that's already survived NEPA, already survived all the court challenges alone, paid for the entire public roads department, the entire school system, and the sheriff's department. Now that there's no logging, we have none of that. Now we're a welfare county, but we're not poor. We have been impoverished by the regulatory process of the state of California. We crafted a declaration. We have one for Lassen County, and we will give one to Joe and the committee, and then when it's time, we'll present that to the Board of Supervisors. They are good people. We want this placed on the agenda as a discussion item. They need time to consider this. They need time to talk it out. They need to ask the tough questions. They need time to think about that. That's fair. And we need to be able to answer those questions for them. So we prepare a presentation item, have it placed on the agenda by the Lassen Committee, and we'll appear before the Board of Supervisors and explain the Jefferson Declaration to your Board of Supervisors. They don't have to vote. We're not asking them to vote. And what we need is for you to pack that room. Because it's not up to me to come here and tell your supervisors what they need to do. That's for you to do. And you need to show up and you need to pack that room in order to do it. Once that discussion has been handled and they have plenty of opportunity to ask you what you think about the whole idea, then they can consider it and place it on the agenda as an action item. And one thing we want to be very careful about, we don't want to go in there before they're ready to vote yes. If they need more time, more information, we'll give it to them. In Butte County, they ask for 6 months to consider it, and they want more information. They're constantly asking for it, and we'll give it to them. And if it takes them 8 months, that's fine. We want to supply them with enough information to satisfy them this is a good idea for the county. So that's what we'll do. Now, once we have all of the declarations that we need, and by the way, there are signature support statements in the back. They're not petitions. You don't have to show your ID to sign them. Children can sign them because they live here too. But we want as many signatures as we can get so that when we walk into the board, I think in Shasta County they have 8,000 signatures already and they're still building because we're not finished there. So when we go in, we want a pile of paper with your signatures on it saying you support state split. And it's not secession, by the way. Secession's illegal. This is Article 4, Section 3 state split. And it's been done before 4 times in our history. The last one was Maine departed from Massachusetts, and it took them 3 tries. But they used a strict Article 4, Section 3 process to separate Massachusetts into 2 parts. So once we have as many declarations as we need to form a viable state, we go to Sacramento. We've already recorded 2, and believe me, that was interesting. They did not want those documents. The Secretary of State said, what do you think what am I supposed to do with that? And I said, record it into the legislative record of California, stamp the copy, and give it back to me. Because what we're doing is creating a challenge. You have standing by affirming the declaration. That gives you the right to be at the table. If you don't have standing, the court will kick you out the front door because you have no right to be there. You're not claiming anything's happened to you and you're not asking for anything. So once you have standing, and we have standing from 10, 13 counties, we've already recorded 2. Then we went over to the state legislature and we recorded 2, one with the Senate, one with the Assembly Parliamentarian. What we did there was we are petitioning for remedy by splitting the state of California in half so that we would have adequate representation. In other words, we announced to the state that something's wrong. We went to the legislature and told them what to do about it. Split this state. If they ignore us, they have created harm. Now there's another thing that the court needs before they can address harm, and that's a remedy. If you buy an ice cream cone and you drop it in the parking lot, and you sue the ice cream parlor owner, and the court goes back in and says, give him another ice cream cone, they say, I'm sorry, Your Honor, we don't have any ice cream left. We changed to a hot dog stand. Then the court says, well, gee, there's no remedy for your loss, so I'm sorry, it's an act of God, case dismissed. But what is the remedy for lack of representation? More representation. So what are we asking for? Are we asking to overturn Reynolds versus Sims? No. We're asking for an adequate representation based on the population model of the state of California, which is the worst ratio in the nation. 1 million people for state senator, 500,000 for assembly person. The next worst state is about 4 times better than California. So we're claiming dilution of vote and lack of representation. If we could get a court to go down to George Washington's model, 1 for 30,000 democracy, 1 for 40,000 is tyranny, we would have almost 2,000 assembly people in the state of California. And the same amount of senators, right? So what do you think the State House would do under that weight? Collapse, right? So that is our unspoken wish. If you allow us to separate peacefully, we will not yank the rug out from under status quo politics in California, and y'all can do what you want to do, and God bless you. Now this is a win-win for California, by the way. We want all Californians to win. We need to help them understand why we need to do this and why they'll win too. And the way they'll win is they can consolidate all of their political power, get rid of most of the people that they perceive as opposition. We're not, but they think of us that way. And they can concentrate their vast wealth and resources to solve problems that I don't even know about and don't care about. You know, earthquakes, big freeways, water infrastructure, gangs, large buildings, things like that. We don't help them with things like that, and we're no benefit to them. And we, on the other hand, will win because we would be free to form a small rural government with a part-time legislature in a regulatory environment where the people are protected and businesses are encouraged to come. We know we'd win. We know we would win. And so that's why this is a win-win for California. It really is ungovernable in its present size. It really is. And President Polk recognized it in 1850. He said, that state's too big. We need to break that thing in half. Now the problem then was Southern California wanted to be a slave state. So Polk wouldn't do it because he didn't want to create a slave state. Alejandro Pico tried it in 1859 or 60, and here's how the worm is turned. His logic in doing it, and by the way, this passed the California Assembly, passed the California Senate, went back to Congress, and it died because the Civil War started. But his logic was, the affluent Northerners are taxing the death out of the agrarian South. Us farmers down here in Los Angeles Basin can't make it with all those taxes. And that passed. So, and the fact that the Senate and Congress never took it up was because of the Civil War. Now, in 1941, Jefferson, the shirts that you see, the double X, the double cross shirts, their big argument was roads to resources. This is so much bigger than that. But we use the symbol because it has a historical value, and people identify with it and they associate with it. So that's why we use the double X. And it is appropriate. We have really been double-crossed by Sacramento. Now, once again, as Robert alluded to, we're not out here to change CalPERS. If a guy has a contract with CalPERS, God bless him. And by the way, Article 10, Section 1 says no state can make any law that changes contract law. We not only don't want to do that and have no interest in doing it, it's unconstitutional anyway. You know, if you negotiate a contract with your employer, good for you. I hope it's a good one. I hope it works. We have nothing to do with that, and we won't have anything to do with that as a state either. And here's another aspect to it that people are wondering about, the debt. How will we apportion? And the apportionment comes under the LAO analysis that the state's attorney general did. And yes, I have some bad news, folks. We have to be a moral people or liberty won't exist. It doesn't work unless you're a moral people. Even though you weren't, thank you, even though you weren't represented, you weren't asleep when the money was getting spent, right? So we are going to have to assume some of California's debts when we break away. Here's the beauty, this is the only great part about Reynolds versus Sims, this is the only good part in the law. Under Reynolds versus Sims, we're based on population. Well, the state's attorney general's opinion is, since Jefferson only has 3% of the people, we're only responsible for 3% of the debt. Now, California will only admit to $340 billion worth of debt. 3% of that is manageable. It's expensive, but we can do it. Now, if we wait 20 years till it's 5 or 10 trillion, yeah, it might be a horse of a different color. So we will be responsible for the debt. Now, everyone else, here's the scare tactic. Well, if we separate from California, we're going to have to pay back California for the prisons and for the bridges and for all the things they built. The state's attorney general says no. As citizens of the state of Jefferson, we were Californians paying taxes and voting when all that stuff got built. And the state's attorney general's opinion is any assets that formerly of California that lie within the bound, and once again, this isn't my theory, you can read this yourself in the LAO report on the 6 states proposition. Assets that lie within the state of Jefferson, formerly of California, will belong to the state of Jefferson. Let's talk about the prison just for a second, okay, because I know people are concerned about that. 3% of the prison population comes from Jefferson. 97% comes from California. So we would be responsible for the cost to house 3% of the prisoners, and we would send California a bill for the other 97%. Oh, by the way, that would be at market rate plus profit and overhead for administration. I'm a reserve deputy sheriff for Siskiyou County as well. I work for nothing for Siskiyou County, having gone through all the school, passed all the tests. You don't get your badge in a Cracker Jack box. You got to do everything regular cops do. You take the oath, and then you get to buy all your own equipment. You got to work for nothing because my sheriff can't afford to patrol his county. In fact, he can't afford to patrol my house. That's why I volunteered. I love the law. I think law is the only thing that separates us from anarchy, but I also love liberty. So as far as I'm concerned, the last thing I want to see is a deal that endangers a correctional officer. In fact, if we charge California to go and raid for those prisoners, we'll be able to give those guys a raise and they deserve it. All of the people we have now are people that we will need. You know, the other scare tactic is, oh, if you vote for Jefferson, we won't have road workers anymore. You know, let's go with adult rules today. If something sounds so stupid it can't be true, it probably isn't. You know, if we have roads, we need people to work on the roads. If we have prisons, we need guards. We need good facilities. We need good schools. But Common Core is not the way. You are the best equipped people in the world to decide what education should be given in Lassen County, not the state. Our problem now stems from lack of empathy. We're governed from 500 to 900 miles away, and then they can't imagine what your lives are like. They've never been here, they've never asked anybody, and then really they don't care because their constituents live differently. But they are looking for revenue generators that come out of your pocket. And I'm telling you, everybody, for liberty, everybody better have a line in the sand. My line is the meter on my well. I will set up my line chair and get out to Remington and sit there and wait for them to come to try to put a meter on the well. So once we have enough declarations, we have legislation introduced, we find a couple of assembly people, hopefully one from each party, to introduce the legislation. And by the way, I went and spoke to the person who does Darrell Steinberg's thinking for him, his legislative advisor. This is interesting, and I really want you to listen to this part. I was very prepared not to like this gal, very prepared. I went in there, and the first thing she said was, you know, I'm an extremely liberal Democrat. And I was thinking to myself, guy, I'm in the right office. But anyway, I went in there, and she was a very articulate, extremely intelligent person. And when we made our case, she said, you know, I'm not against that. Wow. She said, you make some very good points and you have a very compelling message. Your problem is people in this building hate change. And they're going to hate the idea of saying that California now stops at the Sacramento County line. But 30% of the legislature is going to turn over in this election cycle. All we need to do, let's assume that conservatives are going to vote for us. Maybe most of them will, a couple of them probably won't, but let's start with that basis. We need to change 16 votes in the Assembly and 11 votes in the Senate. Out of 120, that's achievable, everybody. We can do that. Also, the Sacramento Bee ran a poll. They ran a poll a year ago, wasn't Terry? And it was something like 11% wanted state split. They just ran a poll after we were in Sacramento on Thursday. 73% in favor of state split. We've already changed the conversation dynamically. We went from, those people are crazy, don't listen to them. We went to, well, it's never going to happen. And now we've just passed, well, they have some really great points, but it's impossible. And now we're at the point that your message is very compelling and all you need to do is reach a few more people and state split is possible. Can you imagine the liberty available in the first Article 4, Section 3 state split in 150 years? Can you imagine the bump in tourism? I just had this kid from Der Spiegel magazine in Germany follow me around for 2 days. You know what he said to me? Germans would love this, you know, I mean, because they don't have liberty there. Government came before the people, right? They have been underneath one monarch or another, or one socialist government or another, since their inception. People created government, everybody. Is the creation now more important than the creator? I say that's not true. My wife and I built our own house with our own 2 hands. We created that building. Is there anything stopping me from taking my bulldozer and knocking that down and building a chicken coop or an outhouse in the same spot? No, because the creation is never more important than the creator. I want to leave you with one thought. Patrick Henry said, I have but one life that guides my feet. I can't judge the future except by the past. I know of no way to judge the future except by the past. Subjugation by the state of California is meant for no other than us. It's been going on for 50 years. It's a sliding scale. We can look at the past and we can have a pretty good idea of how the future is going to go. And we have the power to stop that. Now, Patrick Henry also gave a speech to the Virginia House of Burgesses, and I want to paraphrase the speech for today because it really is appropriate for today. He said that he was in the Virginia Burgesses and the war was starting. They were fighting in Boston. And he said that if we wish liberty, we must separate. If we wish liberty, we must separate. He meant from Great Britain, but the premise is the same. He said, they tell us we're poor, and we can't do it because we're too poor. Will we be any stronger next week or next year? Will we be any less poor? Will we be in better position to do this next week or next year? I say to you, no. You gentlemen cry peace. You want peace. You want to just not think